So for the sake of time, we are going to move ahead. Our next speaker is Dr. Peter Duffy, who has been very actively involved with Sky in several roles. I think he has been in the Board of Trustees as well as chairperson of the Advocacy Committee and Sky representative in NCDR, and currently working independently, but also has been involved in quality in the Cath lab. So he's going to talk about how we can keep our staff happy. Although a lot of times we forget about our staff, but I think if they are happy, we'll be able to do much better in the Cath lab as compared to if we only focus on ourselves. So Dr. Duffy, over to you. Please go ahead. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. We have a recorded talk there that I've done to be sure we stay on time. If we can put that on, please.
Okay, so should we go ahead and play that talk? And then
yeah, because I'm here, but we'll be sure to stay on time if we do the recorded talk.
Okay, good.
And we'll talk a little bit about some difficult conversations in the Cath lab to sum up the presentation. But happy staff, happy Cath lab, and I really have to thank Dr. Bob Applegate, who shared these slides with me from Baptist Wake Forest Hospital in North Carolina. Bob's a superb guy and a superb interventional cardiologist and a good friend. As far as disclosures here, really not an expert on happiness, but I am striving to get there. Well, what is happiness to start with? Well, happiness with respect to job satisfaction is got a lot of thought process on it there. If you Google that, you'll come up with over 9 million suggestions or thoughts on how to make your staff happy. And this is not just in the hospital, but this is staff in the business world as well. But if you drill down a little bit to Cath lab staff, it's over 1 million things on videos of how to make your Cath lab staff happy. So there's no shortage of ideas on how this can occur, but more importantly, it speaks to the fact that we want it to occur, that a lot of people are looking for happiness in the Cath lab. So what is happiness to start with, and why is it important to have happiness to begin with? The Harvard Business School says it's a state of being which recognizes that every day is an opportunity to learn and to do something better. That all life is a journey which can take us progressively to more positive places. Or bottom line is, I feel really good about myself and my life. But going back to the definition, I think really it's what all interventional cardiologists strive for. We all strive for learning, we all strive to do something better, and frankly, we want to leave a positive impression on ourselves and on the people around us. So why is happiness important? Well, clearly staff are more productive when they're happy. It's a more reliable workforce when they're happy because you can count on them to do what they say they're going to do with the qualifications that they have. Studies have shown that it improves Cath lab safety. It reduces turnover. If people are happy with where they're working there, they tend to stay there longer and not be looking for another opportunity somewhere else. And it allows for a culture where people can trust each other and be able to interact appropriately to facilitate process improvement. So let's look first at the employee perspective on work happiness. When employees were surveyed, the question was, what makes you happy? Why do you like going to work? And the top things were relationships with coworkers. If you felt good about going in and worked well with people, that was an important aspect of it. Opportunities to use skills and abilities. So you come to the table with some skills and abilities. Can you develop them? Are you allowed to use them there? What's the meaningfulness of your job? What's the work environment? How are you getting along with your supervisor? Is the organization financially stable to the point where you know you're going to have a job next week, next month, or next year? Are you contributing to the overall goals of the organization? But importantly, on a balance of that, do you have some autonomy and independence to do what you think is right to contribute to the progress of the organization? Is there some variety of work, meaning it's not very boring? And what's the overall corporate culture? Is it a positive place to work? Do people feel good about it? So that's what employees are looking for when they think about work happiness. Notice that compensation was not among the top 10 factors that they were looking for. People are not looking for just the money because they realize that if they're working just to get a higher income, many of these things here, which are intangible but critically important to their happiness, is not going to be there. How about the employer? Well, the employer wants to keep a work-life balance a priority for their employees. They want to feel like they're making the employees a big part of the picture and that they're transparent and honest with their employees. They think one way to make them happy is to offer more vacation time, to encourage communication, to create a career pathway. And this is particularly important in the Cath lab and in healthcare in general. A positive work environment always helps. You want to build up employees, so you always have a positive attitude and a positive attitude toward your coworker. And when you're talking about a coworker to your patients, you want to tell them how good the team member is that they'll be working with. And employers want to set the example. They want to be thankful to their employees. They want to recognize and reward them and figure out how they can offer benefits beyond the basics. And again, these are concepts. In many cases, we'll find that employers are not able to meet these goals that they've set for themselves, that this is what at least they say these goals would be. How about the manager? We're now drilling down to the Cath Lab manager perspective. Well, the Cath Lab manager is happy when they've got a retained Cath Lab staff. In other words, they don't want to be recruiting all the time, retraining all the time. They want to make sure that there's work hour flexibility, that they're compensating the people that they're working with appropriately, and that there's an opportunity for them to specialize or look at what it is that they want to do in the Cath Lab, be it in peripheral vascular, structural, interventional cardiology, whatever it is that they're particularly interested in something, we provide that opportunity for them. Call team compatibility is critical, and good Cath Lab managers know this and know the social aspects of who works well together and who doesn't work well together. It's important to minimize whining. If you've got one complaining person in the Cath Lab, that can really sour the relationship that everybody has there, and it makes it more difficult to be happy going to work on a regular basis. It's important to address interpersonal conflicts early. Don't let things get out of hand. Be receptive to staff lab complaints and issues. So when something does come up, it's important for the manager to address those and be consistent. And the bottom line is setting expectations and having zero tolerance policy for activities that are not what you want them to be. How about the staff itself? Well, as I mentioned before, call team compatibility is crucial. People don't want to be coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning with people they don't want to work with. If you've got a procedural base, you've got more directive care, more direct patient care, and frankly, less drama, because there is going to be, there's well-defined job skills that folks have to have there that they need to focus on. You want to have some choice of hours, you want to have choice of days, and we come into the picture as well. They want to work with docs that are efficient and are safe, and they can appreciate that. New procedures, bringing in new procedures and techniques is important. They take pride in the reputation of the Cath Lab, and they appreciate it when their opinions are considered and their opinions matter. And that's important too if you're working with a Cath Lab tech while you're doing a procedure, to get their input on how you're approaching the procedure, because in many cases, they've seen it before and they may have some good input for you to listen to. What creates Cath Lab unhappiness and can lead to uncomfortable conversations? Well, those 4 domains are performance issues, behavioral issues, interpersonal conflicts, and a lack of understanding of the corporate policy. So how do we navigate uncomfortable situations? And just going to cover this in the last few minutes we talk there, because this is the more difficult thing that we look at there. Why we hate feedback and how to make it easier. Well, one of the reasons, again, as managers or as leaders, we don't really receive any training on how to give feedback. But once we understand that it's our responsibility and right to discuss an issue and it's our responsibility to resolve it, it tends to empower us. And the focus needs to be really on the fact that these are professional issues, not personal issues for any individual. So how do we navigate uncomfortable situations? Well, first of all, we set it up so that it's less likely that they're going to occur. And that's important to do by setting clear expectations. If people know what's expected of them, then in many cases they can conform to that. But it's important to note that what you permit, you promote. So when you see an expectation not being met, when one person does it, they may do it over and over again. And if they see somebody else doing it, they may start to do it as well. And that creates a downward spiral that sometimes is difficult to control. And it's important, again, as a manager or leader, to recognize the rules apply equally to all. There really can't be favorites in a professional standing like that. So how do we what's the framework for handling work issues here? Well, first of all, we want to evaluate the scope of the problem before we meet with the individual to discuss that. We want to meet with the person in private and establish the extent of the issue and what we expect the resolution to be. So we need to be the leader of this discussion, not simply asking, what do you want to do, but saying, here's how we're going to handle the situation, here's how we're going to evaluate it, and here's what we're going to do going forward. And that goes to the last point of developing a framework for ongoing action items to correct and prevent issues. So again, a clear definition for that person of what the problem is, how the problem needs to be resolved, what the expectation is that they will resolve it, and then a reevaluation at a period of time, be it a week, a month, or 3 months later, to evaluate whether the problem is still ongoing or not. Basically, these are great ways to deal with difficult employees. Listen and be professional, be cool. This is not a personal issue. You want to be kind to the person, but firm on the issue, and focus on just the issue and have the discussion about just when you're in control, what that issue is. You want to define corrective actions and expectations on what it is that you expect that employee to do for the Cath Lab and for the organization, and make sure that they understand it and accept it. In many cases, this means writing it down and having them sign a piece of paper that says, I understand, and I will address the issues that you've laid out here, and we will meet again to discuss how I'm doing with that. You want to be positive and supportive because, again, you're not trying to force this employee out. What you want is that employee to be a better team member, and that support is really important to make them feel like they are a valued team member. Again, you're documenting and sharing that with that person as to what the decisions were, and then you periodically want to provide positive follow-up and feedback for them when they are doing the things that you've asked them to do. Lastly, and this is from Dr. Bill Little, also at Wake Forest Baptist in North Carolina, you're happy if you choose to be. And I think that's really the bottom line. Attitude counts for everything. We really can't control very much in our lives, but the one thing we definitely control is our attitude. We can't control what happens to us, but we certainly can control how we react to it. Thank you again for the privilege of being here, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Again, a great talk. I think all these three talks were really excellent to help us how to basically do work-life balance and keep our morals up and give equal time to our families, friends, and work together. So I think we are running a little bit late, but quick comments from panelists, if any, please. Dr. Babar.
Yes. I think excellent talks, and I hard it really find difficult to tackle that there's always sides from the administration versus the Cath Lab. When you talk about a Cath Lab director getting empowerment and to support your team and try to give them time off or schedule, you always get a lot of resistance from the administration that they want to handle things their way so that they can have the monopoly. How would you, Dr. Duffy, what's your take on to this? How do you manage this kind of turf war?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question and very common, obviously a very universal issue. I think the first is when you take on the responsibility, have that discussion with them as to, well, what is your role going to be here as the Cath Lab director? What are your responsibilities, and how are they going to be overseeing those responsibilities for you? So you've got to develop a personal relationship really with the person who's going to be working with you in administration. But I think clearly the first thing is set the expectations, set their expectations, and let them know what it is that you're going to want and the support that you're going to need from them. And then secondly, ask what the goals are. What are the goals for them, for your Cath Lab? And how can they help you achieve those goals, and point out to them when they are interfering, how they're really not achieving the goals that they agreed to set in the first place there. So I think it's a matter of setting expectations and holding them accountable to meeting those expectations with your help.
Any other comments? Okay, so I think thank you very much. We're going to move ahead, and our next talk is going to be Dr. Robert Riley, who is an interventional cardiologist. He has been actively involved with SCI as well. He is a JSCI editorial board as well, and served on several committees and also as a council chair. So he's going to talk about, again, another important topic in the Cath Lab, complications, documenting, debriefing, and doing the right thing. Dr. Riley.